Hey guys, welcome back to Ace Recaps. Imagine waking up one day, only to find out that murderers are no longer locked up in prisons, but instead, they're put into a deep, dreamy slumber. Welcome to the twisted world of Hypersleep, a 2022 Italian sci-fi thriller where justice is served with a side of surreal hallucinations. In the year 2050, criminals convicted of murder are sentenced to hypersleep. Inmates now serve their sentences in a state of deep sleep. Every few years, the subjects are awakened, and they are shown some pictures and a holographic projection of their loved ones. Looks like the future takes the phrase sleep tight a bit too literally. These visuals are chosen by the inmates themselves to help them remember what they have done and what they have lost due to the crime they committed. This is because when a person is in hypersleep, it disrupts their perception of time. Since their brain spends the time dreaming in a sleep world, all their memories become jumbled, and they still remember being as young as when they went into hypersleep. So basically, it's like a really intense LSD trip, but without the fun part. The Prime Minister of Italy, Costa, states that currently, there are 90,000 prisoners locked up in 180 hypnos labs across the country. Although this new program has reduced crime by over 50%, some people still protest against it, calling it inhumane. However, Minister Costa's main goal is to eradicate all crime in the country. Dr. David Damiani, the lead scientist at a hypno lab in Rome, is seen reviving a man. Wakey eggs and... Oh wait, never mind. The man's daughter has left him a message about how she misses her mom because he killed her. The man promises he has nothing to do with her murder, but Dr. David is there to evaluate his condition, not the case. He then ensures the inmate remembers everything he did and puts him back into hypersleep. Valley, the janitor, who is also David's best friend, assists him in putting the criminal back along with all the other inmates. Later, David goes back to his chambers and makes love to a beautiful woman named Viola. She finds a picture of his deceased wife, whom he lost to cancer. David is not supposed to have anyone in his room, but he has broken the rules and has been taking care of Viola for a few months. Because what's a sci-fi thriller without a forbidden love story? When he gets back to work, he runs into Dr. Andrea Rinaldi, a man hired to take over David's work. David is outraged and takes it up with the lab's director, who claims it's time for him to retire as working in such a lab could have dire consequences on one's mental health. You think? Working around sleeping murderers all day seems like a totally chill job. David then starts the handover to his colleague Dr. Andrea. He explains all the job's complexities to him, and they wake up an inmate named Anna Greco. At first, she's confused about where she is, but David reminds her of her crime, where she ran over 2 women after drinking and was sentenced to 9 years of hypersleep. She seems to mix up a few of her memories, but once she recalls everything, she has a mental breakdown because she never meant to kill those women. Suddenly, she has a seizure, but the hypnos system manages to stabilize her. Later that night, when David is out on a date with Viola discussing their future plans, a little boy approaches them, calling Anna his mother, so she helps him find his table, which somewhat confuses David. Yeah, I'd be confused too if a random kid started calling my date mom. A few days later, as David returns from his daily jog, he is interrupted by some protesters on the street. When he gets back to the lab, he sees that inmate 517 has already been revived by Dr. Andrea. However, there is something fishy this time, as the inmate is not shaved like the others, and Andrea claims it was an emergency reawakening that wasn't programmed into the system. When Dr. Andrea claims that all his data has been wiped from the system, David is suspicious of the circumstances. So he decides to put 517 back into hypersleep. Dr. Andrea is skeptical of this decision because, with no data on him, he's supposed to be a free man. Inmate 517 then starts talking about random facts regarding David that he's not supposed to know. David then decides to go through his personal belongings to find any data regarding the inmate. When he does so, it appears he has suddenly lost all access. Just then, the alarms go off, and a woman in hypersleep is losing oxygen fast. David manages to fix the problem and is now suspicious of Dr. Andrea because he doesn't believe all this to be a coincidence. He believes inmate 517 and Andrea are accomplices, trying to help him escape. They both come clean to the janitor Valley, at which point he sides with Dr. Andrea by pointing a gun at David. When they all go to check on inmate 517, we see Viola tending to him. David is surprised to see her there, and Viola starts to question why he hurt him. Everyone in the room starts turning against David, which is when 517 steals Valley's gun and shoots him. He takes Viola hostage and has David handcuff himself to the chair. He then starts sexually assaulting Viola, making David watch in horror. Viola soon starts enjoying it, which is when we realize she was in on it the whole time. Well, there's a twist I didn't see coming. Bravo writers. Inmate 517 soon starts to choke Viola, but luckily, David breaks free and kills the inmate but hits his head on the floor, causing him to pass out. Sometime later, David wakes up hairless and strapped to the chair. Dr. Tressa Levi, who's in charge of his reawakening, tries to make him remember his crime, but he seems to have everything confused. She then proceeds to tell him the truth about what happened. One day at the lab, Viola shows up along with her son to click a video for her husband Carlo Conforti. This man turns out to be inmate 517 and was sentenced to 80 years in hypersleep after he was convicted for the murder of his assistant, whom he was having an affair with. This makes David recall everything that led to this situation. One night, as he goes for a classical music show, he spots Viola playing the piano. He pays her his compliments after the show and asks her out. She is thankful for his help in having her son pay respect to his father, so she invites him over for a glass of wine. The two of them really hit it off and end the night by making love on the floor. Not bad, David, not bad. Back in the present, David recalls the relationship between them to have lasted 4 long years, but Dr. Tressa clarifies that it only lasted 11 months before he killed her husband. Oops, my bad, I totally lost track of time while committing murder. One day, Viola gets a call from a stranger, claiming that her husband is innocent and was framed by powerful people. Viola then asks David to help her find the truth about Carlo. She expects him to reawaken her husband and find out what really happened through him. Knowing that if he helps prove Carlo's innocence, he would lose Viola forever, so he goes on to delete all of Carlo's information from the servers and then cuts off his oxygen supply. Murder seems like a totally reasonable response to potentially losing a girlfriend. Carlo would have died in silence without anyone knowing until his reawakening months later. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. His oxygen was also connected to another capsule, leading to the death of Anna Greco too, sounding the alarms and getting David caught. David is heartbroken that his actions led to the death of an innocent woman, so he begs the doctor to put him back to sleep. This is when she reveals that this is his final reawakening, and he's now a free man. His sentence still has 10 years left, but the court has granted him to serve the remaining years on parole because he has shown that he has repented for his crimes. After serving 10 years in hypersleep, David has recently turned 55. He will be under strict surveillance, and if he breaks any of the rules, he will be put back into hypersleep. He then meets up with his parole officer, who turns out to be an unpleasant person. David has to visit a mandatory support group meeting every 2 weeks and will have to sign in every day at his job. He is taken to his new place of stay, where he is supposed to live throughout his parole. That night, he dreams of his memories with Viola. The next day, at his new job as a hotel receptionist, he sees a strange man pointing a gun at his head through the surveillance camera. As he gets distracted, the man suddenly disappears into thin air. Just a casual hallucination of someone trying to kill you. No big deal. At the support group, all the individuals talk about how the hypersleep deeply messed with their minds. For years, their brains did nothing but dream, so realigning to reality might take some time. Some of them can't seem to fall asleep, while others complain about seeing things that aren't there. All the while, David keeps seeing his ex-wife in another woman. The next day, David is forced to make a TV commercial on the benefits of the Hypnos program and how it has made him a better person. Because clearly, having your brain turned to mush for years is great for rehabilitation. As he walks back home, he sees that Viola is playing at a nightclub. He goes in just to have a glimpse of her, but she spots him and recognizes him. He leaves immediately, but she follows him out and tells him never to show his face there again. When he gets back home, his place has been completely trashed by his parole officer, who continues to assault him just for the sake of it. He even finds a random picture of a fountain that doesn't belong to him. The next day at his place of work, he runs into the old janitor Valley. David thought that he was no longer alive because of his dream, so Valley tells him that hypersleep plays tricks on the brain. Valley advises him to be careful as the unemployed people of the country tend to target ex-inmates for stealing their jobs. So David tells him about the picture of the fountain he found in his house and how he thinks someone is after him. Listening to this, Valley decides to leave him his gun to protect himself in case things go south. Ah yes, the perfect solution, give the murderer a gun. David tracks down the location of the fountain in the picture, where he runs into an old man who turns out to be Anna Greco's husband. He lies to him, saying that he was Anna's colleague and gets himself invited into the house. The old man claims that his wife was innocent and was framed to silence her. Anna was working on exposing the whole Hypnos program and their wrongdoings, which is why they framed her. He even goes as far as blaming Prime Minister Costa for everything that happened. A vast government conspiracy? In my futuristic dystopia? Well, I never. David takes pictures of all her research, which is when the old man recognizes him through a photograph and kicks him out of the house. David then goes over to Viola's house and tells her everything he just found out. He thinks he's innocent and was framed for both the murders. Viola invites him in, and they find out that Anna and Carlo were working together to expose the system. While going through the documents, they find a man next to the Prime Minister, Aaliyah Treves. He's the man who told Viola that her husband was innocent 10 years ago and is probably the one who left David the picture of the fountain. So they decide to pay him a visit. When they spot him walking out of his office, David takes him at gunpoint. Aaliyah claims to have been working with Carlo and Anna to expose the corrupt management because the political party in power was using the program to brainwash anyone against them. He steals David's gun and proves to him that he's not really a killer because the gun wasn't even loaded. That night, David and Viola go back home and make love again after 10 long years. The both of them still haven't lost feelings for each other. As he leaves for work, he spots the same individual pointing at his head again. After pondering over it, David discovers that it's actually a memory flashback telling him to check his cap. He finds a memory card within it, and after inserting it into his tablet, he discovers the truth. Before Carlo's death, David performed an unauthorized awakening of him to find out the truth. Carlo claims that hypersleep slows down the brain frequency, lowering all their defense mechanisms, which leaves the individuals to be reprogrammed as and how the government sees fit. When the individual is reawakened and reminded of his crime, his brain infinitely dreams about it, making him believe he committed the crime even if he did not actually do it. So basically this whole system is one giant mind freak? Color me surprised. When David is about to put Carlo back to sleep, he makes him promise to stop digging around this to avoid putting Viola's life in danger. Just then, David sees a few people abduct Viola from her house. He follows them and gets to a gathering of all the richest and powerful people of the country. He manages to sneak himself in, where he runs into Dr. Andrea, his ex-colleague. He takes him at gunpoint, which is when Andrea confesses the truth about working for Prime Minister Costa, who ordered him to kill Carlo and Anna. When the people at the top found out that David was reopening old files and digging around, they decided to frame him for the murders. Prime Minister Costa is then called on stage for a speech, which is when David goes forward with a gun, demanding the release of Viola. When he tries to expose the Prime Minister for the things he has done, Costa cleverly manipulates everyone into believing that the program has significantly reduced crime rates. And the award for best gaslighting goes to. Viola is soon brought out and handed over to David. As they leave, David starts hallucinating once more and suddenly wakes up back in the chair. The doctor in charge of the reawakening tries to convince David of his crimes, but when he sees the pictures on the wall, he is confident that he is innocent. However, the fight for justice remains in vain because when the doctor shows him a mirror, David realizes that he is now 80 years old, and his life was spent in hypersleep. Looks like someone hit the snooze button one too many times. But David reveals to the doctor his research, and she decides to start digging around herself and eventually finds the memory card in his cap. Hopefully, this time around, the truth will finally be brought to light. The movie ends as we watch David being put back into hypersleep, dreaming about his life with the ever so beautiful Viola. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.